Okay, at this time, we're going to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the flag salute. I
I
pledge
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 allegiance
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 to
to
the
the
to the
flag
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 of the
of the
of the
United
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 States of
States
States
of
of
America
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 and to
and
the
and
to
to
the
the
republic
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 for which
for
for
it
which
which
it
it
stands,
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 one
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 nation,
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 under
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 God,
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 indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
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 justice
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 for
for
all.
for
all.
all.
Thank you. Route of egress. In the event of an emergency, all people may exit right or left from this room and proceed to an exit door. All doors will open from the inside. The New Jersey Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Haledon Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published in the North Jersey Herald News, the board's official newspaper, on January 13th, 2021, and January 15th, 2021. On January 15th, 2021, notice of this meeting was made giving all the instructions for the virtual meeting. Notices of this meeting indicating date, time, and place were posted publicly on the door of the main entrance of the school and filed with the clerk in the municipality of Haledon. Roll call, please.
Make sure am I muted? No. Miss Diaz,
Here.
Mrs. Isa,
Here,
Mr. Jacques, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Here.
Mrs. Perez,
Here.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Here.
and Mr. Guzman.
Here. Okay. At this time, we're going to proceed with a interview for a vacancy on the Board of Education for an unexpired term. And Mr. BA, how many applications did you receive after it was advertised?
We just received one.
Okay. And I see here that was for a Nathan Webb. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Nathan Webb is here present today.
Yes.
Okay, so at this time, we're going to proceed with an interview of Mr. Nathan Webb for the school board vacancy. Mr. BA, do we want to bring a chair in the middle of the room?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay. Okay, board member.
George, you stay there. No?
You can see him
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right, that's fine. That's correct because he has the microphone. Very good. All right, board members, we'll start with these questions. We'll go around the room. I guess I'll start with the first question, and then we'll go to my left to Ms. Diaz, Mrs. Isa, Vic, Mr. Moxo, and Mrs. Perez. Mr. Webb, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Webb, we're going to ask you a series of questions. Like I said, I'll be asking you the first one. The first question I have is, why do you want to be a Haledon School Board member?
Well, thank you for asking the question, and thank all of you for having me here. My name is Nathan Webb, and I've been a Haledon resident since 2008. I am originally from Kansas, went to William Patterson University, and I have served in 2 school districts as a music teacher for the past 10 years. I was approached by Ms. Angelis Diaz about the opening, and I feel that I'm in a point in my life to, I guess, to search after and to expand upon my role in education. I feel that as a educator, I'm able to reach a population, and I feel that as a board member, and eventually I'm actually going for my doctorate at William Patterson in ed leadership. Eventually, I would like to reach a larger audience with my passion and my gift towards education. So I feel that this position here, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just saying that I feel that this position here for the Heldon Board of Education is a perfect fit for me since I've been a long-time resident, and I feel that this will be a place for me to live for the foreseeable future, and I'm just truly honored to be a part of this board.
Thank you. Ms. Diaz?
Okay. So Nathan, I do know you for quite a while, and I know you in a different capacity as a music teacher, and I am a witness of how you touched the lives of many kids of Patterson and how far you went with them. Um, but to this Board of Education of the community of Heldon, what specific skills would you bring to the board?
Well, I feel that I am a someone who would be an effective listener, someone who has a passion for doing what's right for the community. Again, I just want to make this clear that I have a deep love for education, and it has been my lifelong career of doing this. So I feel that I can bring all of my experience from the I guess all of my work within Patterson and within Belleville school districts to here in Heldon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Isa?
We can hear you. You're muted.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh,
Please give specific examples of your ability in interpersonal relationships and teamwork.
all right, thank you for the question. Um, Over the past, I would say 5 years, um, my last 5 years in Patterson, I was a part of close apart. I was in close ties with the music supervisor, and she allowed me to reach out to all of the music staff, specifically in regards to SGO um, preparation on the arts teachers and how um, we could, align as a district in terms of putting that together. So in terms of like teamwork, I feel that that was one thing that I really wanted to do is to have us as a group come up with ways in regards to creating the SGO testing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Antanovic?
First of all, thanks for applying, Nathan. I was really impressed by your resume. Um, just to piggyback on what you asked about teamwork, could you go into a little bit more detail about the role of a school board member in the community?
All right. Well, yes, and thank you for the question. I guess a school board member is to, I guess, collaborate, create policies, to adapt and amend them when needed. Also, I feel that it's important for the school board to monitor, I guess, how well the district's running, under the administration of the superintendent. So in regards to the community, I also feel that a school board member should be visible, should be involved. Obviously, during the current moment with the COVID, it's a little difficult, but when things get back to normal, it's definitely my goal to be a visible present within the district, being able to be seen at events, being able to, contribute in that way.
Thank you. Mr. Moxo?
Good evening, Ms. Nathan, and thank you again. Um, Nathan, can you please describe your previous community or non-profit experience?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, this dates back to when I was in college. I used to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club, and actually, this is what got me into education. When I first started college, I was a performance major, just seeking to perform. And I started to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. This is in Wichita, Kansas. And there was a moment there at the Boys and Girls Club where I realized my potential positively affecting young people. And I was there for 3 years. And like I said, like my moment at the Boys and Girls Club basically just catapulted me into the role of music education, education in general. When I moved to New Jersey, I just sought after opportunities to, to volunteer. Yesterday, Martin Luther King Day, I was a part of the Black Lives Matter. They do food drives. So yesterday we were in front of the Patterson Library from 12 to 2, and that's just something that I just feel that in my heart I need to do, giving back to the community and just like just helping people, even if you don't expect anything in return.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Perez.
The answers so far. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question to you is, what areas would you like to strengthen in our district?
Well, thank you for the question. And to be completely honest, I don't know too much about the district. So to answer that question, I would like for the district to maybe have a bigger outreach to the community. Um, I mean, the things that I see, just as a Heldon resident, I do see the parade every, I guess, Labor Day, I think it is. But beyond that, I I think it would be wonderful to have more. And I know that there are, since we had the new park on Tilton and Belmont, there seems to be events happening there. It would be nice to see more events from the school district, possibly. Just my answer is just more outreach in general. As an arts person, I obviously love concerts and love to see things that way. I just feel like those are ways that can get the community involved.
I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Mr. Webb, thank you so much. I have two questions, if I may. Um, and I appreciate your honesty saying that you don't know too much about the district. But the things that you may know, um, what do you believe are the district's strengths? And number two, if you are, appointed tonight, do you plan to run officially for an election?
Okay, thank you for the question. And I will say this. I have been a homeowner since 2015, and it's a two-family home. And whenever I rent it out, people are flooding to get into the district. They're flooding to get their kids in because they know that the opportunities here at Heldon Public Schools is at a high level. So, if anything, it would be my honor to be able to maintain as a board member the standard of excellence here at Heldon Public Schools. In regards to search and reelection, of course, if I feel that I am a good fit for this position and I feel that I am making a difference and making a positive impact here, of course, there's no doubt that I would want to search reelection.
Thank you. Mrs. Diaz? Ms. Diaz, sorry.
I don't have further question at this moment.
Okay. Any other questions from any board members?
I'm sorry, I keep muting myself. Are you aware of the time, training commitments, and ethics law disclosures required for school board membership?
Yes, I am aware. I've been briefed a bit on that, and again, I'm willing to do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any board member have any further questions you may want to ask? Okay. Mr. Webb, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to go into an executive session so we can discuss this impending appointment. So in the meantime, when we go into executive, we're going to ask you to come out this door and just wait outside. And when we're
Okay.
done, we'll call you back in. Okay. Do we have a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing the candidate?
So,
Second.
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 By Ms. Diaz, second by Ms. Perez. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. You're right there? Do we have a motion to come out executive?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Ms. Diaz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Mr. Pagani, has the public been admitted yet?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to appoint Mr. Nathan Webb to fill the vacant position on the Board of Education through 2022 reorg?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Diaz, second by Mr. Moxo, and roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes.
All right, congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Webb.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome, Nathan.
All right, we'll make this official. Mr. Webb, at this time, I'm going to ask our board secretary and our business administrator, Mr. John Serapiglia, to administer the oath of office.
Hey, Hamlet.
Yeah, the Melissa one. I know.
Okay. Congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education, Mr. Webb. At this time, if you would like to say a couple words, I'll give you the floor.
All right, so I'd like to thank all of you. And I just want to assure you that I will do the best of my ability to represent this board, again, to my best ability. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the Budget 101 presentation by our business administrator, Ms. Serapiglia.
Thank you. Um, Let me pull up the presentation.
Guess you'll be sharing that on Zoom, Mr. BA?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
the. Let me just pull everything up on here because the one over there is PDF. All right, give me just one more minute and I'll pull up the. And then I guess I'll have to be made host.
You should be able to share your screen, Mr. Serapiglia.
Sounds good. Um, all right. So. All right, can everybody see it? I don't know what this is going on. Technology. Yeah. All right, look at this. Cooking with bacon now. Everyone see it?
Yep.
All right, so sorry for taking so long, guys. But this is what I've titled to be Budget 101, or how a school budget is put together. We are at the very beginning of our school budget process. So before we get into the nitty gritty, we start talking about numbers and what's going on, expenses and revenues. I kind of like to give a bird's eye view as to the process of what we have been doing for the last couple of months, what we will be doing over the next few months, how the numbers are put together, and how the whole process is so that you guys are comfortable when we're presenting the budgets to you, that you have a comfort level of all the work that has gone into it. So before we get into it, what is a school budget? School budget, in theory, is about our priorities for our students. We want it to be about our children and their goals for their future. I mean, ideally, if we said we needed help in math, you would see additional money in their math expenses, additional teachers, coaches, things like that. However, it is in reality is very much about money. Decisions are made with finances in mind. If we had an endless supply of money, we would obviously not have this issue, but we are constrained um, with the amount that we would be asking for taxes and things like that. We schools operate on a fiscal calendar, which is July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. However, budgets are being put together between December and February of that preceding year. So I always like to make the statement that, we are looking at doing expenses now that aren't going to be realized until May or June of 2022. Obviously the state allows us to do things like transfers and whatnot, but it's not an exact science. As I'll state a number of times through this presentation, it is our best guess. It's an educated guess. It has a lot of background that precedes it, but it is our best guess. When we're putting together a budget, we must follow these two simple rules. Tax revenue must be within cap or within cap plus waivers. The cap is 2%. So that means that our taxes cannot increase by 2% unless there are certain other things going on, things like increased healthcare costs or things, large enrollment increases. And the most basic of rules, which is applies to really any budget or anything in terms of accounting, revenues must equal expenses. For us, where does the money come from? We have two major sources of funding, state aid and local taxes. That makes up, I believe, something along 90% of our budget. The remainder of the sources of revenue are federal aid, which is our IDEA grant, as well as our ESSA grants. Um, we do receive some other grant money. This year, we received CARES grant money, instance. We also get a limited amount of money from interest. In years past, we've gotten money for tuition, either for programs that we were running in the school. We also do have, on occasion, have had students that were considered homeless that we were able to get revenues from their prior districts. We also are able to budget surplus or have reserve withdrawals. Surplus is money that is left at the end of the school year. Basically, the best way to think of it is as a savings account. It's really unspent monies. With reserve withdrawals are savings accounts. That's money that we set aside for specific items like capital projects, for potential tuition adjustments, and for maintenance reserves. Important points on the revenue: while expenses can and do change during a year, the main revenues for schools, taxes, and aid do not. Except, of course, this year they did actually change. They went down. The state aid went down because of the pandemic. However, that's not the usual case. But they do not typically, or they're not, yet they do not typically change. So when we set up our budget over the next couple of months, the taxes that we're going to be collecting are going to become pretty static. The state aid number is also going to be pretty static. What is going to change are the expense side of the budget. Expenses are going to be adjusted. Expenses could come in more expensive, less expensive, and those adjustments have to be accounted for. If the expenses continually come in more than anticipated, we aren't able to raise additional money by going out to the taxpayers and asking for additional taxes, or we're not allowed to go to the state and ask for more state aid. So typically what we would have to do is make adjustments on the expense side, which means make cuts in other areas. Spoke about the revenue side. We talked about the money coming in. Where is it going to? The majority of, as in most school districts, the majority of money goes towards the personnel. It goes towards salary and benefits. We also have money set aside for out-of-district tuition costs, utility costs, repairs and maintenance, professional services, technology, transportation costs, supplies, textbooks, materials, support services. And one thing I didn't list on there, although it is something that we have been doing pretty vigorously here over the last couple of years, is been capital projects as well. I spoke about this before. We have budgetary restrictions. There is a budget cap. Law states that we can only raise local taxes 2% from year to year. Now that's the cap. It's not where our budget number isn't capped. Our tax number is capped. And that's really an important distinction, because there were years when, especially, I think it was like about 5 or 6 years ago, the state aid numbers weren't increasing. And that was, like I said, that makes up about 45% of our budget. So while that was frozen, state aid, and obviously the taxes we were bringing them up to cap at 2%. Well, we were actually only seeing an increase on our budget of 1% because half of the budget, half of the revenue was going up 2%. The other half was not going up at all. So when you average it out, it was about a 1% increase on the overall budget. As I spoke about previously before, we are eligible to ask for more of an increase for certain costs that increase more than 2%. One of the prime ones that we always discuss here are health benefit costs. If health benefit costs are above a certain percentage increase, the state of New Jersey has said, hey, listen, you know what? We don't want you to have to make cuts elsewhere in the budget to balance things out because health benefits are going up. If your board is okay with it, if your community is okay with it, you can actually go above the 2% number on taxes to collect for that portion of the expenses that are going up on the health benefit side above the threshold, above, in essence, the 2% number. So how does the board decide what goes into the budget? At this point right now, what we are doing is a compiling numbers. Myself as a BA, I'm looking at trend analysis. We're getting estimates from certain vendors, especially if we're looking at potential capital projects. We've already started getting cost estimates for instance, technology upgrades that we're looking to do in the 2021-22 school year. We get estimates from the vendors. Obviously, these numbers can change by the time we're going to be doing the purchases, but they're estimates as of now, because again, we need to have numbers to like I said, for our guesses in terms of what the expenses are going to be for these costs. We get proposals and estimates from vendors. We get proposals and estimates from our professional service contractors. We have an architect of record that we will go to. And if we have big projects that we're looking to do in the upcoming school year, we will ask them, what should we be budgeting for this project? And they'll give us a budget estimate, and we'll make that part of our overall budget proposal in our budget book. Superintendent's going to work with administration to project number of students, look at special education numbers, analyze current staffing to make sure that we're able to meet these needs. If enrollment numbers are going up, we might be looking to add additional staff. If enrollment numbers are going down, we might be looking to reduce staff. If we're looking, again, it also depends on where those students are, the classifications of those students. It might be that the enrollment from year to year is going to be relatively flat. However, we have a changing special education population, which would require us to hire more staff to accommodate them. Principals and administrators are going to make recommendations regarding building needs and instruction and program. We're going to review mandated costs. Each 3 years, we do negotiations with the teachers union, and we set up a salary guide that governs salaries for those 3 years for the teachers. What we're doing right now is looking at staffing that we would need for the upcoming 2021-22 school year, and advancing the teachers on that salary guide, and advancing them a step up. We're also looking at health benefit costs. For those of you who don't know, the health benefit cost went had a major change this past, actually December into January, with the Chapter 44 law. So we're going to be looking at what our current health benefit expenses are. We're going to estimate what we believe to be the benefit increase or decrease for January of 2022. And we're going to, again, budget a number for the 21-22 school year. We're going to look at our out-of-district tuition students. The students that we currently have out, we're going to assume that those students are going to remain placed out of district. Obviously, if there's the chance of us bringing them back within district, we are going to explore that. But we're going to have conversations with our special education staff to basically say, listen, what students are we going to have that are going to be continued out? Are we going to have any students that we are going to potentially place out? Are there any students that are going to be graduating that we're no longer going to be responsible for their out-of-district tuition? We're going to get proposals from our audit company. We're going to speak with our insurance agent to have an estimate in terms of what we can anticipate for our insurance increases for things like general liability and property and casualty costs. We're going to look at our attorney fees, look at trend analysis. What have we been spending with them over the last couple of years? Again, testing services, contracts, energy, transportation. Transportation in part is going to be tied into our out of district costs. Do we have a lot of students that are going to be placed out of district that we are needing, that are going to be required to be transported? That's the fixed cost of the budget. The soft costs are going to include things like school supplies, textbooks, professional development, which actually is becoming more of a mandated cost, maintenance of the building, and as well as supplies for the departments. These are areas that if we needed to, we could actually reduce spending, even if the trend analysis would speak to the fact that we needed to actually spend more money in those lines. So again, what does this all mean? I kind of want to, this is a couple of new slides for the board members here. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what it is that we're actually looking at. So right now we're looking at the enrollment. We're looking at the trends. Is enrollment increasing? Is it decreasing? Looking, like I said, at the configuration of the students, determining the needs for the school population for next year, moving them up, employees that we're, obviously looking to continue with in the 2021-20 school year, advancing them up on the step. For those that are not on the salary guide, those aren't governed by a negotiated contract or a collectively bargained contract. We assume some sort of increase on salary. Again, that doesn't mean that we have to necessarily give an increase, but we like to budget for things. Again, budgeting is sometimes thinking about the worst case scenario, or thinking I'm not saying a salary increase is the worst case scenario, but assuming that in terms of budgetary, it is because it's an increase in cost. For new hires, we're looking at budgeting all of them at BA step one. That's not our decision. That's actually something that the state of New Jersey requires us to do. Again, benefits, what are we looking at doing? We're tied into expecting staffing. If we have a certain level of staffing that we're expecting for the 2021-22 school year, we're going to be looking at what benefit payments we're currently making. And then again, make educated guesses based off of things like prior year experiences. So if we've seen that the health benefit costs have increased by 5 to 7% every January, we can certainly assume that going forward, that trend will continue. That's what trend analysis is. Other benefit costs, things like Social Security costs, those are based off of total salaries. There's a contribution formula for our PERS contribution that is based off of, we in part, again, base it off of what's going on in the current year. We have, again, negotiated contracts that also speak to things like the amount of money that we set aside for tuition reimbursement, which is considered a benefit. Again, out of district tuition costs, we're looking at current placements, expected placements, looking at potential graduations. Again, we get an estimate from the state of New Jersey on what the tuition cost would be. Transportation, again, as I spoke about before, in part, it's tied into out of district tuition cost. Certain students that we are responsible for providing out of district tuition, we're also required to provide transportation for. It's also tied into enrollments. Now for the Haledon School District, we don't have to worry about transporting regular ed students. Everybody lives within the designated mileage that nobody's required to be transported. Again, current contracts, we're going to be looking at increasing by the CPI percentage. CPI percentage is inflation rate. Program costs. Now we're going to send, and Mr. Waka is currently working on this right now, his budgetary numbers for next year. What numbers are we providing to him? Well, we're going to look at population, and we're going to say, we're going to assign a spending per pupil based off of what our last ASSA enrollment was. Again, we're going to give Mr. Waka the total dollar amount. He and his team are going to decide where the money goes within the lines that he's in charge of. Again, technology, athletics, co-curricular, again, providing an overall budget, asking those supervisors to basically designate where the money needs to go. What this means is that, as I spoke about before, let's say that we say, you know what, we really need to focus on social science this year. You know, we really need to spend the money there. You'll see that Mr. Walker will set money aside within the social study lines. You know, he'll have purchasing of anything from textbooks to, like I said, potentially additional staff, you know, potential coaching, maybe PD that's needed within those lines. So again, that's when we speak about, you know, being in charge. That's really what we're talking about. Where, you know, those who are in working with the students, deciding where we want the needs of the program to go. Special education, again, we spoke about the out of district placements. We're also going to be looking at this, the child study team is going to be looking at IEPs, both students that are currently within the district as well as expected placements, and then they're going to budget as needed. Administrative cost, that's going to be a focus, which actually does have limitations. Um, we do have limits in regards to what we can spend on administrative costs. You actually aren't allowed to increase your administrative cost on a per pupil spending from year to year, which sounds somewhat crazy because all expenses are going up. And if your enrollment is going up, then technically you're supposed to be cutting administrative costs in your district. Fund 20 is, you know, like I spoke about the IDEA, your ESSA monies. That's typically what we do is base it on a 90% funding from the previous year. Custodial, maintenance, security. Again, what we spoke about before, trend analysis, contracts, proposals. You know, what is it that we're currently paying for outside vendors for, you know, certain improvements. Again, you know, we do have a preventive maintenance schedule for some work that we're doing, but this also covers, you know, unanticipated maintenance costs. What have we been spending the last couple of years? And then, like I said, if are we seeing a trend that the numbers are increasing every year? Are we seeing that the numbers are averaging out to be about the same number? That's going to go into what is budgeted in the future year. How do we come up with the numbers? Again, when possible, we want to use a proposal from a vendor that's a hard, concrete number. We spoke about that. Uh, I'm sorry, and it's not architects providing for custodial contracts, it's more for capital projects. A vendor provides costs for, let's say, 100 Chromebooks. Again, this is something that we're looking to buy in the future year. The vendor will provide us a quote in January or February that then we will base our budget off of. Again, trend analysis, we're going to look back at 10 years worth of data. Whenever you guys get your budget books, you'll see that there's the backup for each of the budgetary numbers has, you know, 10 years worth of information unless it's a salary or benefit line. And you're going to see what have we spent in those lines. So what I always like to say is that you might not agree with the numbers or the overall numbers, but you can see from the data how we actually arrived at that at those numbers. Again, you're going to look at average spending, are costs trending up, or are they trending down? We're going to compile the expense side. Again, it's going to be, you know, trend analysis, the budgets that all the supervisors are putting together. We set up the expense side of the budget, then we work on the revenue side. State aid, which is a figure given it to us from the Department of Education in February or March. We kind of work a rough number right now. You know, in years past, you know, last couple of years, we had actually seen an increase in state aid for Halden. Obviously, with the pandemic, we experienced a cut during the 2020-21 school year. You know, we're hopeful, I guess, right now that state aid would be frozen, although we are starting to anticipate that there's a potential for state aid to even be cut for the 21-22 school year. Federal aid, again, calculated on trend analysis and projections. We typically calculate it based on a 90% assumed number from the 2020-21 school year. Interest is calculated based on trend analysis and projection. Tuitions based on current and expected contracts and trend analysis. And that would be for any students that we do have coming into the district. And again, we're going to come up with an estimated number for revenue. Then we're going to calculate the tax number. We're going to take what we put together on our expense side. We're going to subtract out all the revenues that I just spoke about, and we're going to come up with the local taxes that are needed to support the budget. In an ideal world, that number is at 2%, or really ideally, that number is at zero, that we don't have to worry about a tax increase. There are potential areas or potential times when that number is, above the number that we are willing to go to, or it's even above the cap. And again, this is sort of, this is why we talk about it as being a preliminary rough budget, because we can and will be making changes to this budget. We can look at doing things like cutting expenses, sharpening the pencils. Again, it's, the first run through with the budget is kind of always the worst case scenario. We're going to assume that we need all of the money for all the maintenance projects that we are going to have. Um, if I'm talking with the special ed department, I'm going to basically say, hey, listen, anybody that you have a doubt about, or 50% chance, at first I'm going to budget for them to be an out of district placement. Um, you know, what we can do when we get into this part of the budget is then we start taking a little bit more risks within the budget. So it could be that, let's say for maintenance for the last 5 years, it averaged out that we're spending $160,000 in the maintenance budget, for instance. But 2 of those years, maybe we spent $140,000. So if we needed to, perhaps we'll say, you know what, we'll be willing to take the chance and say it's going to be this year will be $140,000 rather than 160 or $170,000 expense within that budget. Again, it's risks that you take within the budget. You always want to mitigate those risks. But obviously, when we were first putting together the budget, we're putting it together very conservatively and then expanding, like I said, it into a little bit more risky area. Although it's never been that we've taken on too big of a risk. Um, Again, it's something that that's the way that I was taught to put together a budget so that, and then you can actually see when I provide you guys with the budget books where the risks were taken. You can see, for instance, that, trend analysis will show that the maintenance budget probably should have been at $160,000. However, you'll see that a cut was made of $15,000, $20,000 to balance the budget. Um, if we are above the 2% number, or even if we are, above a number that we're willing to go on taxes, we can also look to tap into surplus. We can look at taking out of our savings account. We actually had done that for a number of years. We took money out of our maintenance reserves. We were not so much our undesignated fund balance, but like I said, we were taking money out of our maintenance reserve. We were taking money out of the emergency reserve. The problem with that is unless you start basically, replenishing that, it's like living off of your savings account. After a number of years, you're not going to have that money in your savings account anymore, which isn't a problem on your savings account, but it becomes a problem on your budget because now you have what's called a hole in your budget. You had a revenue that is no longer there, but you still have the same expenses that you had in prior years, and most years they actually increased. So you have an imbalance between your expenses and your revenues that can either be made up with finding a different revenue stream, which, like I said, is somewhat difficult in these times, or you can, really the way that we would balance out the budget would be to make a cut. Finally, you do have, and we spoke about this before, the ability to go above 2% if the board and the community was so willing. Again, it's for certain expenses that have an increase of more than 2%. If expenses are needed to be cut, cuts are considered and done in consultation with the administrative staff, finance committee, board of education, and the superintendent and business office. Again, you know, from my point of view, I always am willing to make every other cut before we even start looking at any staff. That's really, my philosophy because, you know, especially when we get into the school year, If expenses don't come in where they're anticipated, well, then we're able to put the money back in to purchase, the supplies that perhaps we cut, or we're able to, like we are doing, we have on the agenda tonight, that we are actually looking at doing the HVAC work that we initially paused because we were worried about cuts. When you take staff, when you cut staff, you get into the school year, you're 3, 4 months in. If you find that the money was there, well, then it's really bad on me. The fact that we didn't have that teacher in front of those kids during the school year, and even though we are able to hire somebody mid-year, again, it's something that didn't benefit the students, from September on. So again, one of the, like I said, I think the philosophy is that the best um, the best thing that we can provide to the students is a teacher in front of them. So that's why we're always looking at, basically making cuts anywhere else within the budget before we even get, like I said, to the staff. So how is the budget approved? When revenues equal expenses within, like I said, the cap constraints, within the with where we're looking to go in terms of the taxes, the board has a preliminary budget. This budget is presented to the board and the taxpayers usually in March. The board then votes to approve that budget. The budget is then sent down to the state of New Jersey. They are going to review it, like I said, to make sure that it is within certain limits. They might have certain questions that they're going to ask us about. When the county approves it, the preliminary budget becomes the district's final budget. Again, the final budget is presented to the public and is voted on by the board. What's important to note is that, at any point, the board can still make changes to the budget. We can make changes between when we vote on the preliminary budget and when we do the final budget presentation. We can make changes when we are making the presentation on the final budget. Um, so again, but once the board approves the final budget, that becomes the operating budget for the next school year. Now, obviously, we have transfers, we can, move money around during the course of the school year, but that is going to be, the basis of where we're going to be operating from in the 2021-22 school year. We used to vote on the budget, probably 9 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. They changed the law that allowed school boards to move their elections to November. And when you moved your budget to November, you actually were able to forego the final budget vote, as long as they fell within the constraints. So what that meant was, as long as you had a budget that was within the 2% cap or the 2% cap plus waivers. You can do a second question. Um, Second questions are kind of, for November boards are a little bit of a misnomer, because the first question always used to be whether or not you approved the budget. The second question was additional spending that you were looking to do within that budget year. The way they work now, and is the way they would work for the Haledon Board of Education, was that a second question would be put on in November, when on election day. It's going to be voted on separately from the budget. It cannot contain programs needed to run the school. So we can't put on there that we are going to put the BA or the superintendent as a second question. You need those positions. Um, for us, it would have to be a program that wouldn't start until December, or mid-November, actually. Um, and the important thing to note on second questions is if the item is voted down, it cannot become part of the regular budget for the rest of that year. So if you put on there to, let's say, hire an additional staff member for this program, it gets voted down by the public. Then I'd come to Chris in January and say, hey, listen, you know what, expenses are coming in less than anticipated. We had um, we had a really good quote on our health benefit costs. We're actually going to be able to afford that teacher that got voted down. We are not able to actually hire that teacher. The reason being is that you put this question out to the public, and the public said that they did not want the position. They did not want this expenditure. So that's why it cannot become part of the regular budget, at least for that year. So, if we ever did do a second question, let's say in November of 2021, it got voted down, it wouldn't be something that we could fund in the 21-22 school year. That is, again, the end of my presentation in regards to Budget 101. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask me. we have it on the agenda tonight, the budget schedule. We had to do a revision to it. But this is going to be, the next couple of board meetings is what we are going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about it in finance. We're going to be talking about it to the Board of Education as a whole. We're going to be looking, and like I said, we sort of try to break it out so that we can discuss certain or different parts of the budget, so that it's not being kind of discussed all at once. So we're going to be looking at talking about personnel needs and potential capital projects for the 2021-22 school budget in February. And then we'll be, presenting really, rough drafts of the budget by the end of February. Again, it's going to be something because we don't have the state aid numbers. We can't say whether or not how close we are to actually having a balanced budget, especially this year because we really don't know what's going to be happening with the state aid numbers. But again, that's what we're going to be looking at doing over the next couple of months. And like I said, at the next board meetings, we will be doing a lot of budget discussions. So that's the end of my presentation. Anybody have any questions? Oh, thank you. Sure.
Uh,
Yay, thank you for that detailed presentation as always. And if you can please email that to all board members. Serves as a good refresher. I know you updated as always. Thank you very much. Does anyone has any questions for the BA as it pertains to that presentation on the budget
I
or
I just
budget
have
101 process?
I just
Rather,
have two quick questions. Uh,
Mrs. Lentanovic, go ahead.
yeah. So I saw in the papers that New York State is considering cutting school aid because they have this huge budget gap. I don't know if this is going to be an issue for us.
What happened?
Um,
What happened?
Mr. Yeah, Mr. BA, you're still sharing your screen. We don't want to see
Huh.
your emails.
oh,
There
um,
you go.
so I was just wondering if there's been any news about. I know we don't have concrete numbers, but is there any kind of chatter of what to expect in the next couple of months in terms of school aid?
Now I have a county meeting on Thursday, so I'm sure that it's going to come up there. That's usually where the questions would start. But we haven't heard anything in terms of, like I said, it's just my guts telling me that it's going to probably be reduced just because
Mhm,
revenues have to be down across the state.
mhm.
So if revenues are down across the state, that's where we would get the state aid from. So I would anticipate some sort of reduction.
Okay. And my other question is, with budget surpluses, where is that money placed?
When we get to the end of a school, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the audit, um, the Board of Education has some options in regards to what they can do with the money. Um, the first is what's called undesignated fund balance, which is like you're saying a surplus, and that's capped at 2% of the prior year expenditures. So we're allowed to have that money, and the state encourages you to have a 2% number, and that's really just in case money.
Mhm,
It's you never want because it's so hard. Like if expenses came in slightly higher than revenues, that you would immediately go into the red and not be able to finish out the school year. So for us, we're at the 2% number. In addition, we have various accounts that we're able to deposit money into. We have about, I think it's like $250,000 in our emergency reserve, $250,000 within our maintenance reserve, and shoot, I'm trying to think how much we have in the capital reserve. I don't have the audit in front of me right now, but I think it's something like six or $700,000 in our capital reserve.
mhm,
And each of these reserves is for a specific cost. Capital reserve is allowing the school district to save up for capital projects. Um, our maintenance reserve is something that can be basically withdrawn out for specific maintenance projects. Emergency reserve is for really what it says. It's any sort of emergency, and that could be a student moving into district that wasn't budgeted that costs $75,000 for an out-of-district placement, or it could be what was that? Yeah. Um, so we do have reserves that at budget time, we actually can designate money out of there to help support the next year's budget. Um, we also, from our audit, and this kind of touches on my report that I was going to give. We met with the auditors. We actually were above the 2% number for the 2019. We finished above the 2000 with the 2019-20 school year. We finished the year above the 2% reserve number. And that was due in part to we stopped um, having in-person classes in March, and that that causes savings within the budget. For lack of a better word, the money wasn't being spent on certain transportation costs, or the transportation budget was decreased. We didn't have expenses for things like substitute teachers. That those numbers went down. So when we're going to start talking about the 2021-22 school year, I'm actually going to be talking about an excess surplus number from 1920 that's going to be utilized in the 21-22 budget year I think it's about over $200,000. So we're going to already be starting off the year with a designated, in essence, a withdrawal from our reserve account, and they're withdrawals because we have too much money in there.
Understood. Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Mr. BA. Okay. Any other questions for the BA? Okay, very good. Moving on to board committee appointments. Just board members, just as an FYI, I'd like to, if you can indulge me for a little bit, I'd like to make some changes just to accommodate Mr. Webb coming on to the Board of Education. So, Mr. B, if I can add this on now so we can take a vote on this.
Sure.
Okay. So, curriculum and technology, um, instead of Ms. Diaz, we can put Mr. Webb. And for policy, instead of Mrs. Slantanovic, if we can put Mr. Webb. With that being said, in my absence, Ms. Diaz will be attending and assisting in any capacity she may with finance or with curriculum and any other committee, and myself as well. Obviously, there will never be 5 board members at a committee meeting. And we got the representatives. Okay, so moving on to board committee appointments. Curriculum and technology will be chaired by Ms. Issa. Members will be also Mr. Jaquez and Mr. Webb. Personnel and management will be chaired by Ms. Diaz, with also Ms. Perez and Mr. Martinez. Finance and physical plan will be chaired by Mr. Moxo, with Mrs. Lantanovic and Mr. Martinez. Policy will be chaired by Mr. Martinez, also with Mrs. Issa and Mr. Webb. Security and safety will be chaired by Mr. Slantanovic, who's also our Board of Health Secretary for the Borough of Haledon, with also Ms. Perez and Mr. Jaquez on that committee. Community engagement will be chaired by Ms. Perez, also with Mr. Moxo and Mr. Moxo and Mrs. Issa. For state and county representatives, it will be Ms. Diaz and Mrs. Issa, and our alternate will be Mr. Moxo. Do we have a motion to accept these aforementioned appointments?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mr. Slantanovic. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa, no. Mr. Jaquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb, abstain,
Mr. Webb will be abstaining until he's fingerprinted and all his everything comes back, just as standard protocol.
Okay. Mr. Zlatanovic
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Thank you, board members. I'm sure everyone will do a great job this year, as always. Do we have a motion to accept correspondence?
So move.
Second.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do you have a motion to approve prior minutes?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mr. Martinez. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens on agenda items only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Martinez, second by Ms. Perez and Mr. Moxo. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. The public portion is now open for any citizens who wish to address the Board of Education on agenda items only. Okay, I see no one.
Anybody? Let's go.
Seeing none, do we have a motion to close?
So second.
Moved by Mr. Martinez, second by Mr. Moxo, and roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Moving on to committee reports, I'll be very brief. I've been in communication with our superintendent, our principal, our chief school administrator, Mr. Chris Waka. I asked him about the vaccinations for our faculty and staff, and rest assured that we're monitoring that. And as soon as that phase is open, we'll be sure that that's being provided efficiently to our faculty and staff, whoever wishes to be vaccinated. There's some other COVID-19 items that I'm going to pass on to security and safety under Mr. Slantanovic, and that completes my report. Moving on to our chief school administrator, Mr. Chris Waka.
Thank you, Board President Guzman. I want to start by wishing Miss Miranda McLaughlin the best in her deferred retirement. She happens to live a couple blocks away from me, so I'm sure I'll see her quite a bit. And when she's ready to come back, when the kids get older, I'm sure whatever district gets her is going to be in a great spot. I also want to welcome Mr. Webb to our board. I think he's going to be a great fit. Once we get everything cleared away, Mr. Webb, I'm happy to give you a tour of our operation at any time that's good for you. I know John also likes to join me on those, so we can answer any fiscal questions that you have. But I'd be really proud to show you about the operation we have and answer any questions that you have. Today, we welcome back faculty and students into our building after about a 2-week hiatus after the break. It did feel really good today to see kids excited and to see staff back in the building. When we don't have them in the building feels kind of barren because those two groups are the lifeblood of what makes this place so special. Um, we are still going to keep doing everything we've done so that we can be as successful as possible in preventing the virus from spreading within our building. So thus far, we've been 100% successful. We're going to still focus on that same level of adherence to all of our safety protocols. Akin to what Mr. Guzman said with his point, I need to thank Nurse Carr and Nurse Figgins, as well as the HEA leadership of Diane Cartana and Amanda Pusilowski. They helped organize the great information session this afternoon, a virtual information session this afternoon. At 3 o'clock, all district employees were invited to attend an information session that discussed how to register for a vaccine in Passaic County, where the vaccines will be given, and when the vaccines will be expected. And I'm also going to ask Ms. Carr, I saw that she's on this, to get us me a bulletins of the important points so that I can get the board members that information as well, since you're all county and local residents. I want to provide this board with an update about the daily operations of the building in terms of attendance during COVID. It's interesting in that we're seeing we're seeing in the middle grades, generally third grade through sixth grade, a slight uptick in the amount of parents that are looking to keep their kids home. And we're also seeing conversely, we're seeing a minor increase in the amount of parents pre-K through second grade that are looking to have their kids come into to school in person. And we've not really seen many noticeable changes of attendance rates with our middle school. In all, these adjustments aren't highly substantial in terms of the overall daily enrollment, which today showed that we had about 255 students out of approximately about 1,000 in the building today. Had everyone that was scheduled to send their child done so, we would have had about 100 more students. But nonetheless, we've always encouraged families that if anyone in the house is not feeling good or the kids aren't feeling good, to stay home. So we're more than comfortable with kids staying home, getting their remote learning as well. I believe that the pattern we're seeing reflects the abilities of each age group. In other words, grades 3 through 5 students usually have a firm grasp of technology, and parents can feel secure that if their child is working at home, their child will be able to receive an education. The middle school grade students are most highly fluent with technology and can troubleshoot any problem that they might come across. With that said, the group that clearly struggles the most with remote live streaming will always be our youngest learners. And this is by no means an indication of the abilities of the teachers, nor is it an indication that these learners are poor learners. It's simply just the result of being so young. I'm sure many of you have kids, and if you haven't, I'm sure you know have someone special in your life that's a young kid. And you'll know that just that age group, the remote learning it's important that we provide this service, but we know it's not a fix-all for education. Therefore, I think it's not a surprise that we're seeing an uptick in the amount of parents that have in lower elementary grades that have wanted to request in person. But still, with that said, we have never yet had run into the situation whereby we've had to refuse a child the opportunity to learn in the classroom because we would not be able to social distance the room if they were there. I went to one kindergarten class today and I saw 8 students in that room, and that was great. Then I went right next door, and the teacher's actually on this meeting tonight, and she had 1 student today. So we're seeing, generally speaking, with our elementary grades, between 3 and 8 students in the classroom. But we do have those outliers where it's we had 0 kids in one sixth grade class today, and we had 1 kid in a kindergarten class today. It's important to understand that even when adults get the COVID vaccine, right, they could still get COVID. They're much less likely to display symptoms. However, they can still transmit the virus despite having the vaccine. Since we know that there is no realistic way a vaccine will be ready for school-age children anytime soon, I highly anticipate that for the remainder of this year, we will look to adhere to a 6-foot social distance measure as a limit for all of our classrooms, which in most classrooms is about 12. When we start the school year in September, I'm optimistic that we will have had many, if not all, of our staff members vaccinated. And I'm hopeful that we can offer a service next year that allows for all students to come every day that wish to come to school, regardless of social distance measures. But at this time, I expect that for the rest of this year, we will adhere to the minimum 6 feet standards. And then this summer, we'll look to see what's going on with the virus to see what we want to do for next year. I got 2 more. Lastly, I want to elaborate a bit about state testing and other Department of Education matters. The state informed us that the student growth objectives is no longer going to be a score that counts for the teachers' evaluations this year. I think that's the right decision, and it's probably a bit crazy that they even took the state that long to let us know this, but I think it's a wise decision. Currently, we are planning to give state assessments this spring because the State Department of Education is telling us to plan for it. However, personally, I'm skeptical that that's going to happen. We know that schools are allowing students to stay home, and if students are able to take these assessments at home unsupervised, I think that kind of diminishes the credibility of whatever scores you're going to get back. So we're going to keep planning for it because it's our job to plan until we're told not to. But I wouldn't be shocked if we're told at some point that they might waive the state test assessment for this year. Um, and lastly, I know there was a really big fire in Haledon last night. I saw some of the video on Facebook, and it was shocking to see the fire that high. It really was. Thank God no one was harmed, and I want to express my admiration for the first responders that got there so quick and helped prevent the fire from getting worse than it already was. That's my report.
Walk, I'm always impressed how you're always um, stay up to date with current events within our community. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
I have a question.
Hmm.
Go ahead, Mr.
Um,
Yes.
so how is the remote instruction attendance? Are kids participating?
The remote instruction attendance this year has surpassed my wildest expectations because we were
Okay.
really worried last spring because we know that with it was asynchronous, so the kids just went on and got work. We found that by providing the structure and the live streaming structure, I'm amazed by how good it's been.
Okay, so there's no concern about excessive
I would say
absence.
there's isolated cases here and there, um,
Okay.
but it's mostly just isolated cases where we go through our process. Uh, and what we've done with most of the cases deal with Wi-Fi issues sometimes. So we have a protocol for students that have Wi-Fi
Hmm.
issues. They contact me and we find a way to help them out.
Hmm.
But I've been really very pleasantly surprised by how
Hmm.
attendance has been with the remote
Hmm.
learning.
And just quickly, if we're not doing the state assessment per se, what are we planning on doing to assess our kids to see how much we lost or how much we got?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me give you an answer when I'm prepared to give you the most exact answer. Because
Okay.
right now there's still so many variables, but that's a question that I have to answer for you soon once we
All right.
figure out what's going on.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Walker? Thank you, Mr. Walker, for your
Thank you.
report. Our business administrator, Mr. John Serpiglia.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Webb. Look forward to working with you. We will be in touch with everything from email addresses to other information that you will need to be as you are a new board member. I wanted to go over some of the resolutions on the agenda tonight. We have two resolutions on under appointments. One is actually cleaning something up. One of the doctors that we had listed prior is no longer with that practice. So that's the reason why there's a resolution removing the name of a doctor. We're also looking at approving the insurance agent through 6:30. This is our current insurance agent. We'll be going out for an RFP for an insurance agent as of 7/1. Um, Other items I wanted to go on. We have resolutions on for suspending the shared service agreement for the 2020-21 school year. This is in due to the fact that the employee retired. We actually have a resolution on with United Therapy. The shared service agreement that we are approving is, or that we are, I'm sorry, the shared service agreement that we are suspending is an employee of ours that is providing um, um, we provide 1 day of work to Manchester. On the agenda, we're also looking at rescinding resolutions. Again, these are cleaning up prior resolutions that were approved for Chromebook purchases. If you actually look back at our prior agenda, we actually had two sets of resolutions for Chromebooks. That's the reason why we are taking it off. We have a resolution on for purchasing desks for the nurse's office as well as the main office. We're looking to do a resolution for DeCara. This was a resolution that was previously pulled. This is to add the unit vent um, to the gym right here. We are looking at the possibility, and we discussed this in finance, of financing some of that work with our CARES money. We are looking at also on the agenda revised budget schedule to tie into the Board of Education meeting schedule that we approved at the last meeting. We are looking at approving ESSA and IDA revised applications. This is to take into account carryover money that we received that was not spent in 2019-20 school year. Other items that I wanted to touch on at the next board meeting, we will be presenting and approving the audit. As I spoke about during my budget 101 presentation, we will be looking at doing presentations at the next board meeting. We are also looking at under new business. I wanted to bring up if we are going to either form a committee or utilize personnel to meet with the Manchester Board of Education in regards to any revisions potentially to the BA shared service agreement. And that is the end of my report. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. BA, I would like to convene a committee for the BA shared service. Now, that's not for your contract, correct? That is for the shared service agreement for BA, correct?
Yes.
I do have a question, Mr. BA. You said that we're suspending the shared services agreement for the speech specialist because the person's retiring?
Correct.
But we have enough staff on our end. Is
So
that right? Because I see Miss McClellan is retiring.
yeah, so if I could jump in and take that. So we were able to, it's faster for us to hire someone through a speech service, especially with that particular position. So we already have a staff member that's taken over already for that service. I spoke to both the Manchester superintendent and, obviously our team, and we both felt that for the rest of the year, the right move is for us just to keep that the person that's performing the service through the speech company to finish the year doing that, since we're almost midway through. But we fully anticipate to reopen that position, come summertime, and then that person that we hire will look to reopen that shared service so that Manchester needs it, they can use that service as well. And
Okay,
we're both on board with that.
thank you.
Thank you. I had the same question, Ms. Issa, and Mr. Walker had answered it for me. So it's definitely a fair question. Um, Moving on to personnel management, Ms. Diaz.
Agenda items.
Finance and physical plant, Mr. Moxo.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Webb on being appointed with us here on the board. I want to welcome our new commissioner, Mr. Vic, and also Ralphie, who's been with us, Mr. Martinez, on the finance committee. We met today. We didn't sign the bills. I'm going to go over the bills and then I'm going to pass them on. We did talk about we amended the item 18.4 for a typo error, which is one of the purchases that we're doing for the nurse's desk. We also discussed some of the main projects, which is one of the changing the systems on the roof for our multi room, and we're looking to see if we can get money from CARES Act, like the VA mentioned, just to kind of alleviate our budget a little bit and just to make sure that we'll be standing strong and continue strong. And that's it. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Curriculum and technology, Mrs. Issa.
Agenda items only.
Policy, Mr. Martinez. Thank you. Security and safety, Mr. Slantanovic.
I don't have anything to report on the agenda item, but I just wanted to add, I was asked to just bring up the COVID,
Yes, if you
the
may,
status on
please.
that. Um, So Nurse Carr and I, we participated in last week's countywide conference call that included personnel from other local health departments as well as our county health officer. And as I'm sure a lot of people have noticed, that the vaccine rollout is problematic. And it's not just because of the county. These vaccines have to be um, shipped by the federal government to the state, and so it ends up being distributed, and it's not meeting the demand. Um, so they're doing the best they can with that. I also had a call with Manchester. I don't know how many of our families that send students to Haledon um, or also have kids at the high school, but Manchester plans to open up a hybrid model in early February. So I discussed with them some key points. I just have to follow up with a couple of things with them, but that's outside the board of ed. I only bring that I only bring it up as it relates to those families that have students in both schools. Um, let's see. And in terms of testing, if people are interested, I mean, the county has mobile testing sites in person. They take saliva samples. There's also the at-home testing kits that are available for county residents. They can just register online, and it gets mailed to them. They go online and they see a nurse through Zoom who you know, go through the steps. It's only 10 or 15 minutes. They take a saliva sample and then mail it back. Um, so Nurse Carr and I, we also discussed. She's organized a testing site before at the school, so we may revisit that for those families who might be interested. We just want to make sure that there's going to be enough people that would want to participate in that. So we're trying to shoot for 100 people. I'll have to circle back with Nurse Carr about more about the details on that. I was also in touch with Nurse Carr and Principal Waka about whether this relates to any of our employees here. From what I heard on the countywide call last week, that Valley Hospital provides uh, they offer to vaccinate caregivers of Valley Hospital employees. Now, I don't know if we have any um, school employees who also have a hospital employee, and they might be relying on a caregiver to watch their kids while they have to go to work. So I have to get more about I have to get more details on that. But otherwise, we're just we're looking. We're in no worse shape than a lot of other places. I mean, the number of cases in Halden have more than doubled since November 2nd in terms of the number of residents who have tested positive to date. But that's not. I wouldn't say that's anything peculiar compared to a lot of other places. Um, in terms of school outbreaks, I mean, we haven't experienced a school outbreak, but statewide there's been a little over 120 school outbreaks, and we're just kind of holding steady the best we can. And I know I just want to bring this up, but there've been a couple of conditions that people that some scientists and parents have noticed that correlate with an increase in COVID in some areas, and um, those conditions are Kawasaki disease and multisystem inflammatory syndrome or symptoms in children or MIS-C. With Kawasaki disease, that's been known for decades, and the, however, it's pretty rare, despite being the leading cause of pediatric heart disease. And just anecdotally, I heard that there was an increase in Kawasaki cases in northern New Jersey. So just so that way people are aware to watch out. When they have. I'm not going to go through all the symptoms because in part I'm a layperson. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that it would include rash and fever. So just make sure that parents stay in touch with their doctors. And that's pretty much it for my report.
Thank you, Vic, as always. I would ask Vic and Mr. Waka and the VA to we can all work together. And I always want us, as we have been, I feel, be a model district as far as how we're with the hybrid and trying to go to actually full schooling and doing it safely. And what I mean is this: so we don't know if there's going to be a mandate to make sure that a child gets vaccinated prior to coming to school. So if we can stay on top of that, so we can get that out to the public ASAP, and get in front of it, before take care of it before it takes care of us. So as soon as we get that information, if we get out to the public, that'll be great
Yep.
because I want us to stay in front of that.
That's a good point. I think right now it might be a little while before they approve a vaccine for a minor. Like I think
Correct.
that's something that we hope it happens sooner than later. But you know, I spoke to Victor early in the week, and anyone else is listening, where I also spoke to the Manchester superintendent, and we both felt that if it's possible, or if the county's looking, it looks like they have their sites set up for already for the vaccine sites, but we're happy to volunteer on a weekend or 2 weekends or a couple weekends our school as a site for vaccines, because I think it'd be good for the community members to be able to come here and get it if need be. So if Victor, if you hear that anyone's looking for a vaccine site, you tell them we're more than happy to host it any weekends.
Yeah, I did email
Hmm.
the health officer and let her
Oh,
know,
perfect.
because we did get a similar request in town too. Right now, I think the preference is for some of the bigger sites, for scale. In terms of a mandate, I mean, I do foresee in the future maybe a requirement for kids that get a COVID vaccine, similar to a lot of other shots. But I think we've got a little way to go before that happens.
Understood. Um, yeah, I definitely anticipate those questions coming, and I just want to be prepared for our parents. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Community engagement, Mrs. Perez. Stain County, Ms. Diaz.
Nothing to report this moment.
Mrs. Isa.
Nothing to report.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to accept appointments?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Ms. Diaz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez, Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. All right. Moving on to personnel and management.
Mr. Board President, if I could just jump in.
Yes, Mr. Walker.
I don't know if it's on the agenda or if it's on the addendum, but we were kind of rushing to get a candidate in for an ESL position today. And sadly, right before this meeting started, I found out that she took an offer in a different district, so it looks like she was playing salaries off one district to another. But we're going to strike that one. I don't know what number that is, John, in front of me, but that
13.6?
is that. Let me see it. 13.
No,
No, it's the
sorry. No, no, no.
addendum.
That's the, oh,
I think it's on the addendum.
13.7.
I think it's 13.7.
13.7. Yeah,
13.7. Yeah, so we're gonna have to
13.7.
strike
Yeah.
that, please.
Okay.
Okay. No problem.
All right. Do we move on?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So before I go ahead, Mr. Waka, um, this the semi logs. It's just like so it's just similar for reimbursement, right? I'm
Uh,
assuming.
I believe it's a state mandate to show that we've done what we have to do for the students, and because this particular individual was the one person that kind of did this service for us, I believe she
Uh-huh.
had to fill that in. So that's why we agreed to, even though she's not currently working with us because she's been out for about a month or so, for her to
Uh-huh.
do this just so we make sure that this aspect of the semi application is complete. And then I think that'll be probably her final act for us.
Okay. All right. So I am going to move items 13.1 through 13.6, and yeah, voiding 13.7 is not active anymore. So 13.1 through 13.6.
Second.
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 All right, moved by Ms. Diaz, second by Mrs. Perez. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jaquez, Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mr. Zlatanovic, and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. All right, moving on to curriculum and technology.
Move items 14.1 and 14.2.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Isa, second by Ms. Diaz, and roll call.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jaquez, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic, and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Moving on to security and safety.
Are
Okay.
you muted? Is he muted? I think you're muted. No? Oh,
Vic, you want to formally
Yes.
move the item so we can accept it?
Yes. We only have one item. I move that one item 16.1.
okay.
Second.
By moved by Mrs. Lantanovic, second by Mr. Moxo, and a roll call.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jaquez, Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Moving on to finance and physical plant.
Yes. I'd like to move item 18.1 through 18.14.
Second.
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Perez, go ahead.
Mr. BA, I know that you touched on rescinding the Chromebooks, but I didn't really hear what was the reason why we're not, since we
Well,
approved
we
it
are,
last
yeah,
meeting.
yeah, the last meeting, there was actually two sets of
Yeah.
resolutions. The reason being we got one set of pricing in and then we got a second set of pricing in. When we got the first one in, we sent it on to the agenda to be approved. When we got the second pricing in, we sent it on to the agenda to be approved with obviously the intent of the first one being removed, but it wasn't. This is just rescinding the resolution that was previously passed. We just don't want it to seem like we're buying 600
Yeah.
Chromebooks.
Okay.
Right. And before we proceed on, just want to mention that item 18.4, there's a typo error in the amount for the desk, which we already corrected. The correct price is $1,162.62.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Just wanted to mention that. Almost forgot.
Spending $16,000 for a
Yeah.
whatever it may have been.
It'll be
A million,
11,000.
a million point one. Okay. Okay. Very good. Um,
Get a second.
I had talked to
Second. No, I think
Oh,
Rafi second that.
okay.
yes, and also before we proceed, I had talked to the superintendent about the iPads. I just want to see if if those 15 iPads were were for
Yes.
all the autism children.
Yes, so I'd asked, all when we're making our budget, like John said, so I met with each assistant principal and and then our director of special services, and I said, what is it that you need most to buy, especially right now? And her answer was it's a special kind of iPad that is best for the
Hmm.
autism kids. So I know that, Ms. Cartana's classes and all the kids that are old enough to really get value out of it are going to use it. And if we need to order more if we have, more kids, then we'll be able to get those.
All right.
All right, moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mr. Martinez. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jaquez, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Um, any new or old business? Okay, I just have a couple things here. I would request that the board takes updated pictures, Mr. VA, if we can arrange that. I know
Yeah.
we have some board members that haven't as well.
Can we get, is it, can we afford to get a photographer to get decent pictures that is not with a phone?
Is
Mm,
some is that something maybe finance can discuss?
Okay.
uh, 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 okay.
Uh-uh.
No, we'll discuss it.
No.
Okay, we'll discuss it. We'll throw it out there.
Stop,
iPhone.
Carlos.
iPhone what?
No. No iPhone pictures.
If the board always makes a collective, responsible decision. Um, and also, Mr. Superintendent, are we ready to discuss after school program, or we're not there yet?
We're not ready to discuss the particular one that we'd spoken of, previously. But it looks more and more like we'll be in a position of strength when we look to procure that.
Okay, I guess my question is, are we ready to start exploring it, or you don't feel we have enough?
I'm ready to make a phone call this week to start the initial conversations.
Okay, okay. So just so the board is aware, I've been advocating along with the community engagement committee, extracurricular committee, to bring some arts and dance to our aftercare program, and understand that we have a COVID situation we've been dealing with. We've been trying to do this since last year, but unfortunately, COVID-19 struck. So we still want to prepare, so when we are up and running, we're ready to rock and roll. So
Yep.
you know,
I'll keep you updated with that, Mr. President.
no problem, sir.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
I know this was discussed at a previous meeting, but I'm really happy to see some of the clubs that have started, even though it's
absolutely.
virtual. The band clubs, jazz clubs, and I think there are a few others. That's great. And my son is participating in all of those, and he's really happy about it. I'm sure other kids are really happy to be doing something recreational, extracurricular after school.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens who wish to address the Board of Education?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mrs. Perez. And roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacques, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. This time, the public portion is now open for any citizens who wish to address the Board of Education. See none here. Do we have a motion to close?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mrs. Perez and Ms. Diaz. And roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mr. Jacques, Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second.
move.
So
Second.
All
By
in
Ms.
favor.
Diaz, second by Mr. Moxo. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacques, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
So I guess we'll be in touch as far as the picture, if however it's going to be handled, whether it's before the next board meeting or however inside. Thank you.